The broadcast is now starting. All attendees can now hear you. Muted.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for the ALCTS webinar on ONIX for Serials. I'm Pamela Blue, past president of ALCTS. We still have a few more people that we're waiting for to join the webinar, so while we're waiting, just like to give you a little bit of information about ALCTS and talk to you about a couple of housekeeping items. ALCTS, some of you are probably very familiar with us. The Association for Library Collections and Technical Services is a division of the American Library Association. For many years, ALCTS has offered outstanding continuing education and programming opportunities to members and to the technical services community at large. In addition to the in-person symposia, pre-conferences, and programs we offer at annual and midwinter conferences, we are working very hard to create and deliver content easily and cost-effectively to the desktop. The online Fundamentals of Acquisitions course, developed several years ago and fondly known as FOA, is still offered a number of times a year and continues to attract participants. Two new online courses, Fundamentals of Electronic Resources Acquisitions and Fundamentals of Collection Development, were offered for the first time earlier this month and were very well received. In fact, the Collection Development course will be offered again starting October 27th, and we have more new courses in development for 2009. ALCTS has also ventured into the electronic discussion area with the introduction of e-forum discussion to facilitate the sharing of information and the exchange of ideas on topics of immediate interest to members of the information and library community. Our first two conversations, which we held back in May and June of this year, drew large audiences of both ALCTS members and non-members, and we believe that providing a vehicle such as the electronic forum is a worthwhile exercise. We are currently soliciting suggestions for future topics and would welcome your ideas. The webinar is another tool ALCTS plans to use to make information readily accessible. Today's session is the second on library standards developed by ALCTS. The first was presented in collaboration with NISO in June and was very well received. This afternoon, the topic is ONIX for Serials. ONIX stands for Online Information Exchange. ONIX for Serials is a family of XML formats developed specifically to communicate information about serial products and subscription information. The development of ONIX for Serials is a joint project of Editeur, the international group responsible for coordinating development of the standards infrastructure for electronic commerce in the book and serials industries, with headquarters in the United Kingdom, and NISO, the U.S. National Information Organization. The webinar will offer participants information about the background and development of ONIX for Serials, describe the various components of the ONIX for Serials suite, explain the benefits of using ONIX for Serials, and outline the challenges libraries, publishers, and vendors face in introducing ONIX to the workplace. I think we are almost at our maximum. There are just a couple of people left to join the webinar. So let me just say a few words about how things are going to work today. You should notice an icon on your screen at the top of your screen somewhere with two small arrows. It's at the right top side of your screen. If you click on the double arrows, you can minimize the control panel and have the full screen displayed. If you experience difficulties with your audio, you do have the option of dialing into the call by using the telephone number that was sent with your webinar login instructions. We welcome your questions, and we will try and answer all of them either before the end of the webinar or certainly online later. Please note that there's a chat feature on the right side of your screen where you can type your questions in. and at the conclusion of the presentation we'll answer as many of the questions as possible, and all the answers will be posted online. The webinar is being recorded, and details on how to access the content, including the answers to the questions, will be sent to you within the next couple of days. I am very pleased now to introduce our presenters this afternoon. Nathan Robertson, my colleague here at the University of Maryland, is Director of Information Policy and Management for the School of Law. He is joined by Katharina Klemperer, the proprietor of Library and Information Systems Consulting, who is representing Editeur this afternoon. Both Nathan and Kathy were heavily involved in the development of the ONIX for Serials standard. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Nathan.
Hi there, I'm Nathan Robertson. I'm the Director of Information Policy and Management here at the University of Maryland School of Law, and I'm here today to introduce you to ONIX for Serials. So the first question that you might have is, why another metadata standard? Don't we already have enough? And what is so special about serial subscriptions that they need their own standard? We have Mark to talk about serials, of course, but who really talks about serial subscriptions? In 2002, NISO and the Digital Library Federation sponsored a study to explore these questions. The resulting white paper revealed that, indeed, an awful lot of information is being exchanged about serial subscriptions. Of course, libraries talk to publishers about their subscriptions. They evaluate product offerings, they actually subscribe, they claim missing issues, etc. But many libraries, rather than talking to many different publishers, instead are talking to subscription agents. These conversations don't just stand alone, of course. Those conversations are about the product offerings of publishers. And how do the subscription agents know about publishers' offerings? Well, of course, they're exchanging information with the publishers. And when a library actually subscribes to a product through an agent, how does the publisher know to send it to the library? The agent has to exchange the information about the library's subscription with the publisher. But there's another party on the scene. Not many publishers actually manage their own online journals in-house. Lots of them rely on a hosting service to actually provide electronic content. Well, obviously, the publishers have to provide content to the hosting service. And how does the hosting service know to provide subscribed content to libraries? Libraries often have to register their subscriptions directly with the hosting service. Or, in many cases, a subscription agent may do that registration on behalf of the library. Are publishers and hosting services the only providers of electronic content? No. Aggregator databases are also part of the mix. Libraries communicate directly with aggregators about their subscriptions, and obviously in order to have content, the aggregators have to communicate with publisher hosting services and with the publishers. Are subscription agents the only agents that libraries employ to help them manage their subscriptions? Well, of course not. Library consortia and networks act on behalf of individual libraries. So all those information exchanges libraries were engaged in, well, consortia may do those too. And of course, since they're on behalf of individual libraries, the library has to talk to the consortium about the subscriptions. And I got tired of drawing all the little dotted lines, but obviously these communications are all about and on behalf of other parties and other relationships. Well, surely we're done identifying the different groups and parties now, right? Well, not quite. How many of you have engaged a service like Serial Solutions to help you sort through and organize your subscriptions and maybe unearth electronic journal access you didn't know you had? How do those services find out about subscriptions? Well, serial information exchange. And how many of you have a link resolver to help guide your users to the electronic content you've spent so much money and effort to acquire? The link resolvers need lots of information about subscription packages, issue releases, and each of their customers' individual subscriptions in order to provide that service. And for any of you who are still wondering whether Mark might be stretched to accommodate all of these needs, let me ask you, if a user wants to know if a particular issue is available, is a Mark holding statement that says contains gaps going to necessarily answer the user's question? So in sum, a lot of different parties are exchanging a lot of information about subscriptions. subscription packages available, subscriptions actually purchased by or on behalf of libraries, available content, new issue releases, and in what format is that information currently being shared. Of course, there's MARC for bibliographic data, but there's also some information available and some updates that have to be handled, like, say, product registrations on web pages. Some product catalogs are only available as glossy PDFs. Some exchanges happen via proprietary data formats, and of course there's a million different Excel spreadsheets formats that get passed around. All of the respondents interviewed for the 2002 study agreed, enough is enough. A standard is sorely needed in this area. And so we have ONIX for serials. ONIX for serials isn't a single standard, it's really a suite of messages. Like ONIX for books, they are XML formats. All of the ONIX for serials message formats share the same framework, but each is individually designed to meet particular purposes in the chain of information flow about serial subscriptions. The ONIX for serials messages are published by Editeur, the international group that coordinates the standards infrastructure for electronic commerce in the book and serials industries. Libraries may be most familiar with Editeur because of EDI for purchase orders or claims, but among publishers, Editeur's important standards work includes ONIX for books, the standard by which publishers and booksellers communicate about books for sales. When you go to Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com and you see publication data, book reviews, and cover images, that data almost certainly got to the online vendor from the publisher via an ONIX for books message. Well, publishers were very eager to have any new standard for serials built on the rich and flexible format and the design principles of ONIX for books, with which they were already very familiar. And in an environment where most exchanges are just Excel spreadsheets being emailed back and forth, there really was no other standard to use as a basis for moving forwards with serial subscription. So, as a result of the findings of the 2002 white paper, NISO and Editeur formed a joint working party to explore and develop ONIX for serials. And let me tell you, it was a party. Weekly or monthly conference calls, hashing out needed functionality, identifying outlier cases that needed to be addressed. The group was widely representative of all the parties in the various serial information exchanges that we've already identified, and included both technical and non-technical representatives. And with Editeur and its consultants based in the UK, I can certainly say we heard a delightful mix of accents on each telecom. The result of the work of this party, the Joint Working Party, was 3 message formats for 3 distinct functions. Serial Products and Subscriptions, or SPS, which describes a particular subscription product offering or can describe a particular library's subscription selections. The SPS may optionally carry pricing information. There's Serial Online Holdings, or SOH, to describe the contents of an online serial or serial package down to specifics about available formats and which issues are and are not included. And there's the Serial Release Notification, the SRN, which is a message to announce the publication or availability, either in print or online, of an issue or even of an individual article. So, why are these things awesome? Why should you be asking your ILS vendors, your publishers, and your agents to start using these message formats? Because it will make your life easier. I started out today talking about the many ways people are already exchanging subscription information, but let's dive in and look at a little more detail at some of these information exchanges and see how a standard can make things so much better. How do you get information to evaluate a new subscription that you're considering? A publisher announces a new product, or you're at the end of a fiscal year with excess funds you need to encumber or lose, so you're looking at available products. What do the publishers have for you to look at to know what's in a package? Some of them may say, hey, we have information on the web about our products. Others may say, a complete listing of all our available titles is available in this spreadsheet. Or perhaps they tell you that all the information they have is on the PDF they email. And of course, in any of these cases, whether you're looking at a web page or a spreadsheet or a sales brochure, you only have the information that they have provided, which may not be all the information you really want. Does it detail exactly which issues are included? Does it indicate whether the content is available in PDF or HTML, if that format choice is important to you? And what if there are two similar products that might meet the need? They may have completely overlapping coverage, or some overlapping coverage, or none. Or you want to compare the prices you've been quoted with some kind of quantitative metric about included content. And how can you tell? You look at whatever it is the publishers provide, and you do your best to figure it out. Well, imagine that you receive a standard message designed from the start to include all the information that you care about. You can see exactly what you're getting, or you would get if you subscribe. And if you're comparing competing products, you can really compare on the merits of the content. That's a happy collection development librarian. Another advantage of a standard here is that you will no longer need to spend time figuring out what information each new brochure or each new spreadsheet has, and even having to figure out what it's even possible to learn about a possible product. We envision these standard messages, these SPS messages, being loaded into your library system, or maybe onto a subscription agent product catalog system, so that you get a uniform view every time to compare product offerings. Another use for SPS. Do you know what titles you're getting, or what titles you already have from any given publisher? Online access to electronic journal titles is often based upon what your current subscriptions are, as well as your current holdings from prior year's subscriptions. While it may seem like publishers should be in a position to already know what you've received from them in the past, that's actually rarely the case, and in some cases, they may have incomplete information even now about your current subscriptions with them. To be fair, recall that libraries subscribe directly with publishers through subscription agents, through consortia, and sometimes via all of these methods at once. And also, many publishers are very large, with diverse divisions covering different geographic areas or different subject matter. So, at any rate, publishers often have to rely on libraries to be able to provide information about the library's current subscriptions and current holdings. So when a publisher asks you for a list of your titles with them, you're digging through your library system, getting MARC reports and reports out of the acquisitions module, maybe searching for all the different variations in the MARC 260 statement of different publisher names. Is it the University of Cambridge Press, Cambridge University Press? It might have changed over time. And also, you're working with your subscription agents, maybe getting Excel spreadsheets from them or using a web interface to search for your current and your past subscriptions. This is an awful lot of work, and you're finally able to assemble a spreadsheet in the format that's needed by the publisher. But with a standard, with ONIX for Serials SPS message, when the publisher asks for a list of your subscriptions, you just press a button in your library system and make the appropriate request of your subscription agent, and a properly formatted message ready for the publisher to load is automatically generated. Other possible uses for the SPS include receiving order information directly from an agent for load into your library acquisition system, or for publishers to provide their catalog of offerings to subscription agents in a standard way. So, on to the next message, the serial online holding message. How do you get information about available issues into your library systems? In some cases, publishers can provide you with MARC records for online journals for load into your catalog. But as I'm sure, as I'm sure you know, those aren't always available. If all the publisher offers you is, say, an Excel spreadsheet of its title list, you can, with some significant effort, massage that data into a MARC record for load into your system. Well, I don't know about you, but I deal with a lot of different online journal vendors, and I tell you what, if I can't get MARC records from them, well, we just don't have time to deal with scores of different spreadsheets for conversion to MARC records here in-house, keeping track of coverage changes or any of that. As a result, our catalog is kind of empty when it comes to information about a lot of our available online content. Instead, what we do, and I expect what many of us do, is rely on our OpenURL link resolver to contain up-to-date information about online journal availability. Well, how does our link resolver know what's available? Well, once a month, not nearly as often as we would wish, we get a proprietary data feed from our link resolver vendor that updates us with what they know about the universe of online availability. So, how do they know what's available? Well, they're doing what I've already said that I don't have time to do. They're going out and they're looking at whatever the providers make available about their online coverage, spreadsheets, website title lists, whatever the link resolver can get. No wonder I only get an update once a month. Standards can provide an awful lot of efficiency here. Imagine that all the providers are producing title lists and detailed coverage in a standard format. We wouldn't have to rely on the link resolver vendors to process these feeds anymore. Instead, we could import them directly into our library systems, both into our catalog and into our link resolver, and on whatever schedule we wished or whenever updates were available. This is obviously a great improvement, or a great potential improvement. The SOH could obviously also be used to populate A to Z lists, or be used for a library to provide a list of its online holdings to a consortium or to a shared catalog system. Now, for any publishers that are not able to produce the standard message, we might still rely on link resolver vendors or other agents to keep track of that provider's available contents. But the feed the agents provide could be a standard SOH message, allowing us to use it not merely to populate link resolvers, but also for catalogs, A to Z lists, and all these other uses. And now on to what I think might be the most exciting of the ONIX for Serials messages, the serial release notification. In the print environment, how do you know if an issue has actually been published? We've developed really a very sophisticated system to track issue publication in print. We receive issues over the course of a subscription to the point where we're confident that we understand the publication pattern and know when to expect the next issue. We encode that prediction pattern for load into the library system, and then, as issues are received, we check them in, confirming the pattern. But when an issue doesn't show up, it triggers the system to complain. We claim the issue with the publisher, or if we're really sophisticated and we're using EDI for claims, the system makes that claim automatically. And then we get a response from the publisher. And those responses vary depending on the actual status of issue publication. They could have already sent it, or it could be delayed for some reason. A short aside about the law student joke. I don't know how many of you subscribe to law journals, but many of them are notorious for publication delays. There's a good reason for that. Most law journals are produced by student editorial boards, and being on law review is often a reward for academic achievement. It's a big deal and very prestigious to be on law review. However, actual experience with publication or any ability to actually produce publications on time, not really part of the selection process. So anyway, we get a claim response from the publisher. Interestingly, only one possible response from the publisher represents a valid reason for a claim. Other responses really just indicate a lack of information about the actual publication of an issue. But on the whole, despite the fact that we sometimes end up claiming things that are just delayed, the system seems to work pretty well for print publication. However, what about electronic journals? They get produced, possibly according to some regular schedule, on some website out there somewhere. But there's no physical object that we receive for us to check in. The entire sophisticated claims system for print relies on the receipt of a physical object. This system just doesn't work in the electronic environment. So we have serial release notification. If the publisher can produce a standard message delivered automatically upon the release of a serial, we now know exactly when the publication occurred and when we can expect it. And of course, our link resolvers often currently, in the current environment, rely on calculated predictions of expected release dates for electronic journals. The SRN message can populate our link resolver too, relieving any ambiguity about when an online issue is available. So, not only does the SRN solve the problem of electronic journal check-in, it also solves, or it could solve, the lack of information claims in the print check-in system as well. So instead of relying on prediction patterns and making assumptions about when the next issue is coming out according to the schedule we believe we anticipate, If the publisher can send us an SRN, we know with certainty when to expect the delivery of the print issue. The SRN has other uses as well, of course. SRNs can update subscription agents' databases of releases or can provide advanced information to abstracting and indexing services to ensure that those databases are up to date. SRNs, instead of announcing a release, can also announce a publication delay to hopefully head off lots of unnecessary claims. And finally, there's an SRN version that describes individual articles, not merely issues. The article-level SRN can be used to announce the online availability of articles prior to their inclusion in a print issue. Well, I hope that you're as excited as I am about the possibilities of ONIX for serials. And if you're like me, you may be wondering, if this standard is already available and is so obviously the greatest thing for the serials world since sliced bread, or at least since the OpenURL standard, why am I not seeing it being used in my systems? Well, that's part of what we're hoping to accomplish today. Get people excited about ONIX for serials and get people clamoring for it and demanding its implementation by their publishers, their agents, and their system vendors. And now I'm very happy to turn things over to my colleague, Kathy Klemperer, who will show you some details about what the XML formats actually look like, information about who is already using them, and more about what you can do to encourage the implementation of these solutions to your serial problems.
It seems to have worked.
Wonderful.
This is Kathy Klemperer talking to you from Boston. Thank you, Nathan, for giving us a great overview of the history and rationale of ONIX for serials. Whoops. There we go. And now I'd like to delve a little deeper into the actual ONIX for serials formats, giving you a quick overview of the content of each of the formats, how they're being used, and some related standards efforts. There we go. As Nathan mentioned, all the ONIX for serials formats use the XML language. The important thing to understand is that XML allows for an infinite amount of nesting. That is, data elements are grouped in structures or composites, and then each composite consists of several smaller elements, some of which may be composites themselves. Compare this to the MARC format, which basically allows only two levels of nesting, at the field level and the subfield level. So for example, you can have an author heading containing a number of subfields, but you can't subdivide a subfield. XML would allow you to do this if necessary. All of the ONIX for serials formats start with a header, which contains a sending organization and an addressee organization, each containing details such as the sender's name, contact person, email address, and identifiers. Some of the formats also have defaults in the header, which allow for a shorter message. And then there's some additional housekeeping elements in the header that the system uses to ensure that a message isn't being processed twice and that sort of thing. And here's an example of a real XML header. This is a sample file that was sent to us from TDNet. Let's start with the SOH format. The serials online holding format conveys information about which volumes, issues, and dates of an online journal are accessible. This information is necessary for maintaining a link resolver and also for getting holdings information into a library's catalog. SOH has two messages containing exactly the same data, just organized differently. The by host message is organized by online service, and the A to Z message is organized by title. And here's what they look like. Of course, the actual structure is a great deal more complicated, but these slides show the basic outline. The by host message has a separate list for each online service, with each journal listed under that service. The red arrows point to the meat of the message. The A to Z message has one big list of journals, and the online service is identified for each journal. So this form of the message is useful for making an A to Z list for online journals. The crucial part of the message is right here inside the online package, where you see the URL for accessing content and the dates and volumes and issues that are available. So where does this data come from and where is it sent? Some examples. A publisher might send its holdings information to a link resolver vendor or to an A to Z list vendor for building its knowledge base. A library might send its holdings information for inclusion in a union catalog, such as OCLC WorldCat. An A to Z list vendor might send a list of online holdings for a particular library to that library's catalog system for display to end users. The second format is the Serials, Products, and Subscriptions format. This one has 4 separate messages. They're all structured the same, but they have a variety of subscription and price information included. Each of the messages supports a different business case. Note that SPS is not limited to online holdings. It also deals with print or other media, as well as packages or combinations of print plus online. And these are the 4 messages. The basic unit of the SPS message is the serial product. A product is the unit that you subscribe to. It might be a single version of a single title. It might be multiple versions of a single title, for example, print plus online. And it might be a whole collection of multiple versions of multiple titles. But the product is the unit that you pay for. So there are 3 units that we have to consider. There's the product, that's the unit that you subscribe to. There's the serial work, which is the intellectual content. This is what we often refer to as the title. And there's the serial version, a single manifestation of the work. Looking at the SPS product list unpriced, we have a product record for each product that's being described. At the beginning of the product record, you have information that applies to the entire product, such as the supplier's product ID, product name, and the online hosting service where online versions in the product are hosted. Then each product record has a list of serial versions included in the product. Serial version information would be the ISSN for the version and a medium indicator. Is it print, online, CD-ROM? For each serial version, we have to identify the serial work that it represents and give information such as the title, the publisher, and the website for the work. And finally, we give the scope of the serial version. There is subscription period coverage, that is, the volumes, issues, and dates that belong to the subscription period. If it's an online version, we show the coverage, that is, the volumes, issues, and dates that are included with the subscription. It's usually different from the subscription period coverage. And finally, the website where you go to get the content. The product list unpriced is pretty basic and mostly would be used to transmit a list of available products, either from a publisher or an agent or a content hosting service. The real usefulness of the SPS format is in the other SPS messages. That is, the product list priced. This is structured exactly like the product list unpriced, but we've added the catalog price, which is a publisher's agent's publicly listed price for a product. There could be several catalog prices for a product, such as the personal price, the member price, the institutional price, or price tiers based on institutional size, or prices for different subscription terms, or prices for different geographical areas. SPS allows for all these prices to be included. Probably the most useful application of this message is for publishers to transmit their price catalogs to subscription agents. Currently, these are transmitted as spreadsheets, and it takes a huge amount of energy to update the agent's catalog by hand. The SPS Product Subscriptions list takes this concept one step further. Still with the same structure, we've now added subscription-related information. This includes a description of the subscriber, subscription identifiers, such as the publisher's order number, the agent's order number, the library's purchase order number, etc., fund codes, location codes, and the actual price charged to the subscriber. How can this message be used? A publisher or an agent could send a list of all of the library's subscriptions with coverage information for all serial versions for the library to use in populating its e-resource management system. Or a publisher or an agent could send a list of all of the library's current subscriptions for the libraries to load into its acquisitions control system. And finally, we have the SPS Product Subscriptions quote message, which adds a price quote. This would be a quote for a particular subscriber. The usefulness is fairly obvious. If a library receives a price quote for the same products from different suppliers, it can load them up into its ERMS or acquisition system and compare prices, if their systems can accept them. Moving on to the SRN format, remember that SRN is used for announcing the confirmed or expected release of an issue. Confirmed release is one that's already happened or is about to happen. An expected release is one that's predicted in the future. The message can also be used to announce a change in the expected date of release or to give notice of a combined release. You can see how this information could be useful in reducing premature and unnecessary claims. If an issue hasn't been released, you can avoid claiming it. If you know the expected release date, you can load that into your serials control system and know when to claim it. The SRN can be used to announce not only journal issues, but also issues of a series of supplements to a monograph, supplements to a journal, volumes of a monographic series, or volumes of a monographic set. And now we'll take a look at the 3 SRN messages. Like the SPS messages, these are additive. Each message addresses a different business case. The SRN issue notice simply announces a release. It's basically a dispatch notice. Subscription agents will add the release information to the dispatch history displays in their product catalogs. Libraries will know when they can reasonably claim an item. Link resolver vendors and A to Z list vendors use the information to update their knowledge bases. Notice that the basic unit is the serial version, not the work. This makes sense because the different manifestations of a work are often released at different times. We know that the online version nearly always comes out ahead of the print version. There's a lot of information in here. Both the enumeration, that is the volume and issue, and the chronology, the cover date, can be specified, including the enumeration of supplements, which can get very complex. If an issue has its own title, that can be sent as well. For online releases, the URL of the issue can also be sent. The SRN content item description goes into detail about the contents of a release. We use the term content item rather than article because content items can be lots of things. Editorials, abstracts, photographs, stories, maybe even computer games or musical recordings. But most of the content items that we deal with are in fact articles. So in reality, the content item description adds a table of contents to the release. The data can be parsed out and used for creating alerts. For example, the following articles have been published in your subject area in the past week. Publishers can use this information as a marketing tool. Sometimes a content item is released independently of an issue. These would be advanced releases of articles made available online before the issue is released as a whole. SRN handles this case as well. The content item description message contains enough information about a content item to be able to generate a bibliographic citation and even a bit more. It's got the author, the title, the unique identification such as a SICKI, pagination, the URL for online items, and of course the title and publisher work. It's everything that you need to find an item. Finally, we have the SRN content item extended description, which contains enough information to create an entry in an abstracting and indexing database. The primary purpose of this message is to send advance notice of an upcoming release to an abstracting and indexing service so that the article is already indexed by the time it appears. It contains such additional information as contract or grant numbers, information about a conference at which the content was presented, the language of the item, subject headings, and abstracts. Originally, the ONIX for Serials messages used a fairly simple form of enumeration when describing coverage and holdings. It was thought that it was enough to identify the volume and issue of a release. However, it soon became apparent that there's an enormous variety of expression for enumeration. So the Joint Working Party set up a separate group to explore a way to express all these variations. The group came up with the coverage statement, which is used in both the SOH and SPS messages, and which has the same level of detail as the SRN message. Briefly, coverage can express many cases beyond a simple volume and issue number. For example, broken runs, moving starts, jumping starts, embargoes, more than 2 levels of enumeration, for example, volume, issue, part, etc. In fact, it can express up to 6 levels of enumeration. It can express alternate enumerations, where, for example, you've got a volume and issue, but you've also got a sequential number for an issue. It allows the entry of the captions that are used by the publisher, and it allows for the enumeration of supplements. The coverage group took as a basis the Mark 21 format for holdings data, although coverage doesn't fill some of the needs of the Mark 21 format. For example, coverage doesn't allow for copy-specific information such as barcodes or copy numbers. So who's actually using ONIX for serials? Only one of the formats is currently in production and in use by vendors, and that's SOH. 3 of the publication access management systems, Serial Solutions, TDNet, and EBSCO EJS, are creating SOH messages for loading into ERMS. The III ERMS is able to receive SOH holding messages. The OCLC eSerials Holdings project receives SOH messages and uses them to build up eResources holdings in WorldCat. OCLC also sends SOH messages for loading into ERM systems. Unfortunately, it's difficult for the standards organization to know exactly who's doing what in terms of piloting the SRN and SPS format. Editor has received suggestions for improvements from some of the piloters and has received reports of projects underway at Cersei Dynex, Sweats, Harasowitz, and Ex Libris. And it's possible that there are others out there that are using these messages. They just don't always tell. Why is the industry slow on the uptake of these standards? One obvious reason is the old chicken and egg problem. Whenever you have a standard for data communication, you need 2 parties involved, one to send and one to receive. Senders are reluctant to invest effort in creating messages if there's nobody to receive them, and vice versa. When the telephone was invented, it didn't get into serious use until there was a big enough installed base, a tipping point, as it were. One telephone is of no use to anybody. The other issue is the perceived complexity of the formats. It is true, but they are only as complex as they need to be. There's no getting around the fact that bibliographic data and holdings are complex. However, for many situations, it's not necessary to implement the entire format. As an example, the coverage statement includes an entire structure for specifying supplement coverage. And the supplement coverage is larger than the structure for the main run coverage. That makes sense because supplement enumerations have a lot more variety than non-supplements. However, an implementer can start simply and just decline to include supplements. coverage. Editor would like to spread the word that ONIX for Serials implementations don't have to be complex, but they are able, if necessary, to express the complexity of bibliographic and holdings data in all their glory. It's gratifying to see that several new standards projects are benefiting from the work that has been done on ONIX for Serials. For example, the core project is a NISO Standards Committee. It's developing a mechanism for exchanging cost data for library systems and subscription agents and providers into ERM systems. The purpose is to be able to derive cost per use information by combining the cost information with usage statistics. As it happens, the data to be exchanged fits nicely into an SPS message, although most of the SPS format isn't needed for this purpose, just some of the subscription information and the cost. The KBART project, under the auspices of NISO and UKSG, is working on developing guidelines for best practice in managing knowledge bases, that is, the databases used by link resolvers to direct users to an online issue or article. Although the SOH format doesn't carry all the information required, it carries some of it and could be easily adapted to carry open URLs as well. The point is that the data structure has already been developed. Similarly, there have been initiatives to develop an activation message instructing a content hosting system to activate online access, and an invoice message to agents from publishers. Both of these can use the basic structure and many of the data elements of the SPS format. The point I'm trying to make here is that a great deal of effort has gone into understanding the nature of the data that travels around the serial supply chain, and the results of this effort can be the basis of further standards. In the best of all possible worlds, the new standards could become further messages in the existing formats. Finally, we would like to encourage libraries and other organizations to speak for the adoption of these standards. The first step you're already taking, namely getting educated about ONIX for Serials. There's a great deal of information on the editor website, whose URL you see here. For each of the formats, there's an overview document, which is a great starting point, plus the XML schema itself, plus a detailed user guide to be used in implementation. And now I'd like to thank you very much for listening, and I will send you back to Pamela.
Kathy and Nathan, thank you so much for this excellent overview on ONIX for Serials. I'm really excited about the possibilities that the format and the standard has for us, and I wonder if there are any questions that you have out there, our viewers. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask Nathan and Kathy, or explanations or further elaboration on anything that was said? I actually have a question for both Nathan and Kathy, and that is what pressure, or what, I don't know if pressure is the right word, what do we need to do in working with our ILS vendors to ask them to make their systems ONIX for Serials compliant? Either one of you.
It's a problem because once you bought your ILS, you really, there's not much you don't have a lot of leverage. If you're getting a new one, put it in the RFP, or keep talking to them.
Right. I mean, how complicated is it to retrofit?
I would say it's not. Go ahead, Nathan.
I was just going to say it shouldn't really be complicated at all. It's not really a retrofit. It's the introduction of a new facility for receiving and sending information. So just like they have MARC loaders that allow you to load in MARC data, they can have a ONIX for Serials loader that allows the load of ONIX for Serials data. there would need to be some mapping from internally within the system of where the ONIX for Serials data goes inside the system, but that's work that can be done and is routine in the industry. All we have to do is convince them that it's worth their time, and we do that by talking about how valuable it would be to us and how excited we are about the opportunities.
Do you know of any libraries that are actually using the standard?
Well, they're the ones that we mentioned. I know the Library of Congress is doing a lot of work with TDNet and with innovative interfaces to try and load up their holdings data, and they're a big gorilla. I almost think that you might have more luck working with the ERMS vendors, which probably benefit more from the use of these formats, but they're also still under development. The ILS systems, the cataloging and serials control systems, those are like, they've been around for a long time, and they're pretty wedded to MARC format. But although, as Nathan says, you can build new loaders to load new kinds of data. But since the ERM systems are still fairly young, and they're thinking more broadly, probably more likely to have luck with those vendors. Also, more people are still buying them. Everybody's got their ILS, but people are still looking at ERM systems. You can put it into your RFP.
Thank you. Are there any questions from our audience? Surely somebody must have something that they would like to ask. Yes. All right, we're going to get a question from Mark Hemhauser. Mark, go ahead. I don't know, can Mark ask his question? Hi, Mark. You have a question? He doesn't seem to be responding. Maybe
you could type it in.
Yeah, Mark. Please. But you know what? I don't think he's going to see this because this is only going to panelists and organizers and not to everyone. Julie's going to send it out. Okay. Just, you'll have to excuse us. We're a little bit new with the question and answer part, well, with the whole webinar process here, and this is the first one that we've done using this software. So we're still all learning the ropes. Hopefully Mark is seeing the message now and being asked to type it into the chat window. Now, hopefully we're going to get something in a minute. And if anybody else has anything that they'd like to ask, they could type it in as well. Cecilia Boone, okay, is also going to send us a question. We do have a few more minutes before our time is up, so we should be able to get to these if we ever receive them. I'm wondering, while we're waiting, if people in Europe or in the UK are more apt to be using this than we are over here in the States.
I don't know. Do you mean because Editor was so active in the development of it?
That's right. And sometimes the Europeans are ahead of us with some of the standards adoption, it seems, at least from my limited experience. I mean, they were one of the first to adopt EDI.
It could be. The committees, though, were really, they were not dominated by the Europeans. There were a lot of United States folks in it as well.
Okay. Well, we don't seem to be getting our questions either over the microphone or in writing. I'm not quite sure what's happening.
Okay, Julie sees the questions, so she's going to type them to us.
I wonder if we're not seeing them because we're only seeing the presenters and panelists and not everybody's questions. But we've lost a couple of people, but that's okay. We did pretty well. All right, the first question is SOH data unique per SPS data?
I'm not sure what that means.
The SOH format has got an awful lot of similarities with the SPS format. I think at their core there's a great deal of similarity. So, you know, in terms of having an identification of what the product is and what the contents of the product are, they're almost identical. Really what makes those two formats distinct from one another is that they carry different pieces of information, different wrappers, if you would, to talk about the kinds of things that are important to the particular function for which the message was developed.
And one important difference is that SOH is really designed only for online holdings, whereas SPS gives you information about entire products, whether they're print or anything, or online or anything else.
And there's another question, can SOH be readily translated into MFHD?
And the answer to that is, yeah, pretty much.
Can you explain MFHD for those of us that aren't familiar with that?
Mark 21 format for holdings data, and those are 9. What are the subfields in there? There's 9. One of the 9, a set of 9 XX fields.
Yeah.
Right. But MFHD doesn't translate completely into SOH because it carries. There were 2 or 3 reasons why it didn't translate. One was that the MFHD allows crucial data to be sent in free text fields, and SOH does. I'm thinking, okay, and the coverage statement, which is used in SOH, does not rely on free text fields. Everything has got to be very specific. The other thing is that MFHD allows for copy-specific information, which is not carried in the coverage statements.
Right. So to sum up, you can express a ONIX for Serials coverage statement in MFHD, but you cannot necessarily express an MFHD statement in coverage. If the MFHD statement includes, if the marked format statement includes some of the things that are just not permitted in coverage, like plain text statements or statements like contains gaps, those are not, those can't be expressed in ONIX for Serials coverage.
And we have another question. What incentive do the publishers have to create this information in the new format? Oh, that's interesting. Yes. What incentive is there for them to do that?
The publishers, it would really be nice if publishers had a greater incentive. But the incentive that we like to dwell on is marketing. If you can send out tables of contents, then we will advertise your new publications for you. We'll send out tables of contents alerts. We'll notify people when new issues come out. And to me, that's one of the bigger incentives. But also, if they can send out their price catalogs in SPS format and the agents can get them loaded up, then people can order them faster. So anything that greases the wheels of the serial supply chain ultimately should benefit publishers as well as everybody else. But you're right, it's a good question. What is the incentive to the publisher?
Well, if they see their bottom line affected, yes, probably they would have an incentive to do it. Another question, how goes development of this, I'm assuming ONIX for serials, with open source ILS initiatives? So is there a connection between, or a relationship between those two developments?
I'm not aware of any. If anybody, if any of the open source ILS initiatives are considering ONIX for serials, we really would, editor would really like to hear from.
I'm wondering if, go ahead, Nathan.
I do know that that some of the people who are involved in the ideas of ILS, of the open source ILS initiatives, are aware at least of the coverage statement and are interested in it as a more precise, always verifiable, machine verifiable expression of coverage. So there is some interest there, and whether there's actually been development on that front, I don't.
How do you know if these open source ILSs are primarily at the moment online catalog and circulation type activity functionality and not so much serials or acquisitions functionality? So how would that data get into the catalog? It would bypass any kind of acquisitions or ERMS working? Does that, am I making myself clear?
I don't know what the details are of what the open source ILS initiatives are actually working with. I don't know if those include serials.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
Serials modules or not. I mean, if they do include serials modules, obviously there's a value here. And even if they don't, as a way to express and store some of the important bibliographic data about serials just for the catalog function, there's a value here.
There would be a value. And then there's a question, do they, I'm not sure who they is, the publishers, send holdings data that is unique to a subscription? Does this mean unique to that library subscription or to that title as a subscription?
I think the question is whether you could get holdings data that's unique to your particular subscription. And the answer is yes, these formats can be used for this purpose. For example, if you have you know, a certain set of journals, and one subscriber gets all the back files and another subscriber doesn't, if you send a holdings statement for a particular subscriber, you could send holdings data that's unique to the subscriber. Now, the person sending the message needs to know what the individual is getting, but they should know that.
Presumably, they would know that from the subscription information that the library provided.
Yes.
Right. Now, there's a question here about whether publishers generate the ONIX statement or if agents could generate them.
Agents can generate a lot of the information.
Okay.
For example, you know, title lists, subscription lists. I think there's a role for agents to play in making ONIX messages.
Right, and I would add that we certainly, I mean, we anticipate that the larger publishers, those who are already substantially involved in the exchange of electronic information about their products, may be able to do this ONIX for serials work themselves. But there are an awful lot of small publishers who really don't have that expertise, and that's exactly a role that we envision for agents to be able to produce appropriate, just like agents are now helping handle our relationships with those smaller publishers. Agents can help us with the provision of electronic data about those product offerings.
And the question is, how would a publisher go about putting their product information into SPS? Is there an available user-friendly interface available for them to use?
Well, the place to begin is to buy yourself a product for building XML data. And the one that I'm familiar with is XML Spy, but I think there are others out there. Are you aware of any, Nathan?
I know that they exist, and I don't know, I can't bring to mind the names of any of them. But yes, XML validators.
Yeah, you can certainly use those for testing. And
right.
I would, if this is a publisher asking the question, I would say get in touch with editor. They would be delighted to help you get started with this. How user-friendly it is, I really do not know. I mean, there is going to be some programming involved, but you're not starting, at square one. You've got the XML schema. If you have an application that helps you to load up an XML file, it can be done.
Okay, well, I think that just about exhausts our time. So let me just thank you again for having attended the webinar, and remind you that the questions that we answered today will all be posted together with the information about the recording for the webinar. You'll be receiving an email message probably tomorrow with the details on that. You'll also be receiving tomorrow a short evaluation form about today's webinar, and I hope you will all take a moment to reply. Your answers are very important to us as we begin to plan for future presentations of this type. We hope that we will be able to announce a topic and a date for another webinar very soon. And in the meantime, thank you again for your attention and have a good afternoon.